This is Man to Man Talks, and today's discussion is about overcoming self-imposed limitations. Craig, you know, it's a funny thing, having spent 20 years in prison and being released at 40 years old, I think back on what was the turning point. And what I realized is that being in prison, there was a moment in my life where I actually realized that I had been incarcerated long before I was arrested. And when people hear that, they say, well, you know, like, what does that really mean?
Right.
Because how could you have been incarcerated before you were arrested? And I'd have these discussions with guys who were in prison with me. And I would just explain to them that for me, prison is a metaphor for self-imposed limitations. And when I say prison is a metaphor for self-imposed limitations, what I'm actually saying is that the majority of people who are in prison actually will never see the inside of a jail because we engage in socially sanctioned, self-imposed limitations. And so overcoming self-imposed limitations is about being reflective regarding the things that have limited your life,
Right.
have limited your efficacy, have limited your ability to be the best that you are.
Right.
And I know that from our earlier discussions that you've had similar experiences, though in very different spaces.
It's a powerful and profound analogy, that. I mean, I've been very involved in working in poorer communities and upliftment work. And I found my aha moment in social development was the realization that it's actually not about the resources. The resources are generally there. They might be lacking, they might be low. It's about what we do with what we've got. I've had discussions with young people in very poor communities where we've given them virtually everything that they need to fly. And yet, because of the sense of entitlement and the sense of I can't do it and the only way I'm going to achieve anything is if someone gives it to me, they're not harnessing their power. And so they will never achieve anything because they've grown up believing that I can't do anything unless someone gives it to me. And overcoming the self-imposed limitation is getting out of the mindset of entitlement and the mindset that says basically, if it's going to be, it's up to me. You know, it was interesting that people generally only pursue what they believe they deserve and what they believe they're capable of achieving. And most of us grow up believing that I'm not capable and I don't deserve. And therefore the self-imposed limitation just restricts us.
It's exactly what you're saying. It's why we say entitlement is the enemy of excellence. When we look at our lives and we look at what we're capable of, what's possible, it's very difficult for many of us, given circumstances that seem to reflect scarcity and an inability to move beyond what our present condition is, to change that mindset.
Right.
Because for most of us, our consciousness is shaped by our environment. And so for me in particular, being in prison, at one point I realized that I was incarcerated before I was arrested. But my epiphany, my aha moment was that if I was incarcerated before I was arrested, I could get out before I'm released. And it was that epiphany, it was that aha moment that made me realize actually the power was in my hands all along. I didn't go to prison because I had been in the Black Panther Party. I didn't go to prison because I had made a mistake. I went to prison because of my choices. And it's those choices, it's the life I chose that was the source of my own limitation. So it wasn't someone else. It wasn't something else.
Yes.
It was me. And once I owned the fact that it was me, I then had the power to change that.
Khalil, I think that's probably the single most empowering truth we can ever discover. The fact that if I give up my power to choose and I blame you for what I'm doing, I've totally given up my power. I'm totally limited myself. As soon as you can make me angry, you have power over me. As soon as I realize that, you know, when I'm angry, I'm choosing to respond to you in a certain way, and that way is anger. When I get that level of self-consciousness, and I just love what you're saying there, that, I mean, those four walls that you were in couldn't trap your mind, could they? Your mind was way beyond that. And I think so many people outside of imprisonment are walking around with the four walls inside their mind and restricting themselves. And it's all about a victim mentality, isn't it? An entitlement mentality. And as soon as we get to the point where we realize, there are two things we have 100% control over: our attitude and our actions. No one can choose our attitude for us. No one can choose our actions for us. We choose those things. And that empowers us to do so much more.
It's exactly that. And understanding the power that we have, we recognize in this whole process is oftentimes people talk about empowerment, how we're going to empower people who feel powerless. What I think that we're saying in these conversations of man-to-man talks is that we're not trying to empower anyone. What we fundamentally are convinced of is that people already have power, particularly men. Men, we're talking to you. We're saying that you have power. The fundamental question that you have to ask is, how are you using your power? Are you using it in the best interest of yourself and the people you say you love, as well as the rest of the world?